So before I continue, there was a question last time from, I think you, right, on dual vector spaces.
Yes.
Yeah, so what is the meaning of dual vector space? So you remember that we had talked about actually before I start, the people who are online, when are you expected to come to IMSC? Within this month end?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Okay, somebody has written something in the chat box.
I am here but in quarantine.
That's who is I? Sarbarth. Oh, Sarbarth. Okay, good. Okay, we will see you soon then. Okay, fine. Okay, sorry, I just came forward to look at the chat. The mouse को छेड़ा है. Thank you. Okay, good. So what about the others? I had one answer. The others will be here by the month end?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One more yes. What about the remaining? Getting answers out of you or trying to extract teeth, you know. Okay, fine. So if you remember what we had defined in, I think, 2 classes earlier. Okay, so maybe I will actually just give those definitions again. Okay, we had defined a linear scalar function phi. And how had we defined phi? We had defined phi of x. And of course, x is written in terms of the basis vectors with components xi along each of the basis vectors ei. Okay, so this is some component alpha. So that is the ith coefficient of some function y is equal to f of x. This is the action of phi on ei, right? And we had also said that, what do you mean by linear function? Phi of a x plus by is a times phi of x plus b times phi of a, right? This is the meaning. But this is what defined a vector space, right? This addition of x plus y is phi of x plus phi of x, phi of y, and multiplication by a scalar, it could be a complex scalar, is a times phi of x. This is the definition of a vector space. That means the phi is the set phi also forms a vector space, and this is called the dual space. Okay? So this space is distinct from the original vector space. Let us call it vector space V, which is spanned by the basis set ei, right? So I have one vector space. Let us take some 2-dimensional example so that I have nice set. Let's call it x and y or something like that. Okay. Then the E1 and E2 will be some, let us call it 1, 0 and 0, 1 in the space. Okay. So I have the original vector space which is spanned by the ei, and this dual vector space phi you can see has exactly same dimensionality as the original vector space, but it is not the same as that vector space. Here you have vectors E1 and E2 in the vector space, and this is a mapping into some complex number, right? So this is simply a number, but this is still a vector space. So I will give an explicit example of this, so which I just took from some other textbook so that we will actually have an example of what it is. Okay. So I will take a simple example where my vector space is simply some flat space, n-dimensional flat space, and in fact I will give the example only in 2D space x and y. Okay. So I just have some flat space, and let us say that the basis set over here is the set called B. So B are all the set of vectors which span the space. So that we have already seen, right? E1, E2, E3 up to, because its dimension Rn, there will be an n-dimensional vector space, and by Gram-Schmidt orthogonality we can actually construct a set of orthonormal basis vectors. Okay, but need not be orthogonal. We already talked about it in fact last class. I will make a clarification about that in a minute, but let me not lose the flow of this argument. Okay. Now we have already looked at polynomials such as this. Sorry, we have looked at, so let us say that the set is spanned by x1, x2 up to xn. Okay. So I can now construct a combination of these objects.
And the part where you are writing right now is not in the field of view.
Oh, okay. Gayatri. Oh, I'm sorry. She just stepped out. Okay, I will actually write on this side. Yeah, I can see what they can see and what they can't see. So let me just write on this side. Until Gayatri comes back, then I will ask her to change it so you can see this, right? That's why I like to have the board in front of me. So you can see here, right? I can start from here. Yeah. So suppose we already looked at this example. Suppose I write a1 x1 plus a2 x2 plus an xn. Okay. So we know that I can solve the set. In fact, if I have n such equations, I can solve the set of equations. Gayatri, good morning. Yeah, actually you can just focus so that I see the whole board. That will be fine. Oh yeah, otherwise you will block the thing. Well, 1 second, just 2 minutes, huh? Here, just push this train out of the way.
No, let them sit there.
Is it okay? Fine. Okay. Fine. Okay. So இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் zoom out பண்றீங்களா?
அது ரொம்ப தெரியாது நமக்கு because
அப்படியா?
இங்க உங்களுக்கு தெரியற மாதிரி இருக்கும்.
Ma'am, you can split the board.
Yeah, fine. No, she said she will move the camera appropriately. Let me just see. Okay, fine. Yeah, I'll manage within that. Okay, no problem. Yeah, so people online can see the size of the script, though it's not too small.
Yes, ma'am, it's fine.
Okay, very good. So let's start all over again. So I had given this example. I said that if you have an n-dimensional space which is spanned by n vectors x1 to xn, then of course I can always write, this will not be independent anymore. I can't write one more vector, but I can have a constraint equation like this, right? So at least some of these a's must be non-zero and b must be non-zero, and I can write an equation like this. Is that right? So if I have an equation like this, and if I can think of solving this like this, so I call this some function of the vectors xi, right? And this is usually called a functional. You might have come across it in classical mechanics, right? I am not sure, but maybe you will come across it in the classical mechanics. It doesn't matter. It's a function of some functions, so it's called a functional. Doesn't matter. You can call it a function, not a problem. Okay. So that means I can write an arbitrary equation like I take some function, okay, acting on the vectors in this space, and I'll tell you why I didn't write x. There's a certain reason for that, is equal to b. This is the same equation. Okay. Now technically, and I'm not going to go further into these complications, this is for a nice flat space. everything is very well defined in it, okay. But I don't need to have a flat space, so I can have an arbitrary set of vectors. So my vectors will be some set Vi, okay, and they may not have the nice properties of a flat space, but still I can make some function or functional of this set of vectors, giving you the answer B in that generalized vector space. But as I said, this is a general statement, but I will always give the example with respect to flat space, okay. So that means, let us take it in 2 dimensions. Suppose I have it in 2 dimensions. What is a1 x1 plus a2 x2 equal to constant in? That means if I have just a 2-dimensional space, okay, then this combination a1 x1 plus a2 x2 equal to b is a constraint equation, right? It's a plane or a line. Here it is a line in this space. In 3 dimensions it will be the plane equation of the plane in this space, and in 4 dimensions it is a hyperplane in that space. So these are all sets of hyperplanes, right? Is it clear so far? Now what you have is that this equation therefore is the concept of a generalized hyperplane in that arbitrary space which need not be a flat space, okay. So I take a set V such that L of V gives me B, and this describes a generalized hyperplane. And I have so many such constraints, right? I can write so many of them. I can write the list of all such constraints that are available to me, and this whole set actually will give me the elements of the dual space. So physically that's how you want to think of dual space, okay. So it's a mapping, and for that mapping it's convenient to actually define a basis set, okay. So first I will define the basis set, then I will explicitly show the mapping. So it's visible up till here, no? So this particular basis set is called the dual basis. So I have to choose a particular dual basis. In that I can show the nice properties of the dual vector space. Is it clear? Yeah.
Here B is called the element of dual space.
Yes.
B.
Yes. The sets of B are defined as the elements of the dual space. Correct.
And they can generally be all complex numbers.
Yeah, they can be all complex numbers. So they are all basically either real numbers or complex numbers. Okay. So here you have a dual basis. What is the dual basis? Okay, I've given some examples here. Okay, maybe I'll give some examples so that you will see something concretely. So before I go to here, okay, I will just show you the set of examples. Okay. Suppose I take V as 3D space, flat space, which you can call anything, but it's just 3D flat space. Okay. Suppose I have a map which is a function which takes the components of this 3-dimensional space. Let us say, let's call the members of the space, the vectors, as x, y, z. So I have L of V. V is now x, y, z, which is my flat 3-dimensional space. Okay. So let me take that particular example to be 2x plus 3y plus 4z. This is the example that is given in that book. Okay. So you can see that for every vector set x, y, z, this phi has some value, right? Suppose I say x is 1, y is 3 and z is minus 2. This is simply a number, but this becomes an element of the dual space. So you might wonder why you want to do such a thing, but you will see in a moment that it can be very useful. Okay. Similarly, you can just, so you can see that this is simply a number, and therefore this dual space belongs to R. So this is a map from R3 to R. You can also have maps of matrices. Suppose I say that my vector space is a matrix, square matrix n cross n dimensional, then can you give it, let's take an example which is a matrix A. Okay, can you give an example of the dual space element? Determinant, trace, anything, it's just a number, right? So those all will be the elements of the dual space of this n by n dimensional matrix space.
It's not mandatory to have only that kind of an equation. Matlab we can have x1 multiplied with x2.
Yeah, so you can define your function appropriately. Okay, the moment you can define this function and it has all the nice linear properties, it's a linear vector space dual to the original one.
But
That's it.
It won't be an hyperplane in any space. Determinant won't be an hyperplane.
Well, yeah, so at some point, that is the whole point of giving the example of this, that if I have something in R3, then I can talk about hyperplanes, and at least in 2D you can imagine, even in 3D you can imagine it. But if you say something in a matrix space or even in a polynomial space or any other space, then you only have this notion of a generalized hyperplane. So you don't really think of it as a hyperplane, but whenever you go back to our usual spatial dimensions example, then you can try to understand intuitively what is meant by the dual space. Okay, there is actually even a formal definition of a vector space, but if you want I can even write it down here. So it says over here, suppose I've given a vector space V. What is the dual space V star? It is the set of all linear transformations phi such that V is mapped to some other space F, typically R, okay, but that doesn't get us very far. So let me actually give you an example. For giving you an example to construct a dual space, I want to define a dual basis, because it is very specific that for the dual vector space I must start out by defining a dual basis. Okay, this is again a little technical reason. Okay, so here we have, yeah, huh?
In the dual space, you write phi goes to
F is typically, you can think of it as R. All the examples we have taken are R. Okay, some function, real space function, think of it as real space itself, R.
So
Just a number.
Can we have different V stars depending upon how we define V?
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. You can have.
Ma'am, so
Yeah.
you have a basis vectors for dot products and another for determinants and another for
Yeah. So the mathematicians think of all these as spaces.
Yes.
Okay, we have difficulty thinking of it as spaces. For us, space means x, y, z or r, theta, phi, but in general, yes, you can.
How we define a function, that will be a defined basis.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And in fact, there is another complication which I simply won't go into. You can see that the dual vector space satisfies all the properties of a vector space, which means that I can define the dual to a dual space, which is called a double dual space. But I will stop here. I will not go beyond this. You can keep reading about it if you wish. Okay, fine. So let's start out with the dual basis. So now I have a vector space V. So let us say the vector space V is spanned by the vectors V1, V2 up to Vn. So it's some n-dimensional vector space. So this is the basis, one particular basis set. Okay, so you see that for the original vector space, in fact we discussed it last time, you can have many choices of basis, and we even talked about how you transform the basis from E to E prime, right? So there are many such basis set that we can choose, and we won't have a problem. But given this set of bases in V, then in order to define V star, I have to define in certain particular way the dual basis. The dual basis is defined like this. So B star, of course it will have the elements phi 1 to phi n, right? It must have the same number of dimensions, which I will show you in an example. Okay, this is the basis. So this is the basis of V star. So basis of V star. Okay, and in this particular case, phi is defined as the ith component phi I is defined as phi I acting on A1 V1 plus AN Vn is equal to Vi. So let us look at it. So the set phi I, the basis, the dual basis is defined such that phi acting on the original basis vectors pulls out the ith component AI. So phi I will pull out AI. So A1 will pull out, phi 1 will pull out A1, phi n will pull out AN, and etc. Okay, so this is the definition of the dual basis. So to write in other words, phi I acting on Vj is delta, very nice, delta Ij, that's it. Only then it will pull out AI, right? Phi I acting on Vj will be delta Ij, so that phi I acting on Vi will be 1 and it will pull out the coefficient AI.
Then V1 to V and this is the basis vector.
Yes, V1, V2, V3 are the basis of the original vector space V.
But this is the confusion or V1 or E1 is the basis.
No, now I am only talking about V1.
Okay.
That is because I have taken it from a different book. Sorry, I hope that it won't confuse people for too long, okay?
Most of the books they are writing EI.
Yes, EI are the basis set. See, normally we think of EI as in real space, but this I took it from a book which is generally talking about mathematics, and they think of vectors as V1, V2, so it's just as simple as that, but it doesn't matter, okay? So
So you can say that phi I, they are not numbers, they are functionals.
yes, exactly, that is the whole point.
They are not numbers.
Yes. And as I said, I will give a very concrete example, in fact, immediately. Okay. So then I can write over here, therefore, in the phi basis, in the phi space rather, or in the V star space, I can write phi is equal to phi of V1 phi 1 plus phi of V2 phi 2 plus phi of Vn phi n. So that means now I have written it in the phi basis. So you can see that I have gone from writing it in the V1, V2, V3 basis to the phi 1, phi 2, phi 3 basis, and these coefficients phi can be got from this definition. So I will take exactly this definition. I had written the reference somewhere. Where is the reference? But it is exactly what I am saying, but I will find, sorry, it is somewhere in my notes. I will find it and write it down. The example is this. Let us take two-dimensional space as your vector space, R2, and let's take a basis set in V. V has a basis set which is 2, 1 and 3, 1. So I didn't even change the numbers, so you will be able to find it. So what are my basis set? Let us take 1, 0 smaller. Let us take 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So 2, 1 is somewhere here. So 2, 1 and 3, 1. So this is what I call V1 and V2. V1 and V2 are 2, 1 and 3, 1, which I can write in terms of the unit vectors as. So what is 2, 1? It will be 2 times the x vector 1, 0 plus 1 times the y vector 0, 1. Right? This is clear? So this is of course a good enough vector set in 2 dimensions to span this 2-dimensional space. So this is a very perfectly good basis set. Now I want to ask, what is B star? So it will be equal to phi 1, phi 2, and what is this? So how do we find it out? We start out with this equation. So phi I, I'll just write it again, Vj is delta Ij. So let's start with 1, I is equal to 1. So phi 1, let's take V1, which will be delta 1 1, which is 1. What will this be? What is V1? And I can write 2 comma 1 as 2 times 1 0 plus 1 times 0 1. Now we know that this is a proper vector space. So multiplication by a constant means I can pull the constant out. So this will become 2 times phi 1 of 1 0 plus 1 times phi 1 of 0 1, and that is equal to 1. So in fact I am going to substitute it in the previous line. I am going to substitute it here so that I have space for the second object. And equal to 1 is already there. Is this okay? Now you can do this yourself. I is equal to 1, j is equal to 1, j is equal to 2. So phi 1 of V2. What will this be? What is phi 1 of V2? 0. Very good. Delta 1 2 is 0. But what is phi 1 of V2? What is V2? So can I write this as 3 times 1 0 plus 1 times 0 1, and can everyone see that this is just 3 times phi 1 of 1 0 plus 1 times phi 1 of 0 1.
Ma'am, in the where this line in the vector space phi is equal to span the phi 1 to phi n.
Yes.
The coefficient why we choose this phi.
This is called the dual basis. The definition of the dual basis is this.
No,
We explained that last night.
we can choose the any combination of phi 1 to phi n.
Yes, but except that these phi of V1, phi of Vn, etc. are all fixed, right? They are fixed by this definition. So you cannot choose any combination. As I said, it's a little technical difficulty, but don't worry about it. I can choose any equivalent set of basis vectors to span my original V. But once I have this basis set V1 to Vn, the dual basis is defined in this way. That's it. I can't do anything more than that. Okay. So once I've chosen this set, you can see that I'm calculating everything else.
No, dual basis is defined this way, but any element in the dual space we can has a linear combination, any linear combination.
It cannot be any linear combination. Given this, I am going to solve for this. So it is only one linear combination. But given a different set of B, which suppose I take another set here. Suppose I take this set, say this vector and this vector, which defines this space. Then I will get another set of phi solution, right? That is also an equally good vector space. Except that the dimension is still 2. I will still get only phi 1 and phi 2. But it will depend on the original vector space. How I define this vector space will define what I will get for the dual vector space. Okay, is it clear?
Ma'am, in
Yeah.
the last line,
This side. Huh.
yes, you have written the general functional phi.
Let me just solve it so that you will see the comparison between the two sides, and then you will be able to do your 1:1 comparison. Okay, so is this clear? Now can you see that I have two equations for two unknowns, phi 1 of 1 0 and phi 1 of 0 1, which I will solve here. I will write the equation as 2 times phi 1 plus 1 times phi 1, 3 times phi 1. So this is, maybe I'll make it smaller, otherwise it won't fit. Trying to write big so that phi 1 of 1 0, phi 1 of 0 1 is equal to 1 0. I have two equations and two unknowns. Can I solve for it? Please solve and tell me the answer. First tell me this, let me call this matrix A. Can you please tell me A inverse? First of all, what is the determinant?
-1.
-1, very good. And what is the inverse? Cannot be that hard, right?
1 2 change and -1 -1.
plus 2. Sorry, minus 2, you're right, minus.
No, minus, no, yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Please multiply and make sure that A inverse A is 1 or A inverse is also 1. You can do all the high school mathematics all over again. Is this clear though? Fine. So what does this mean? If I have A inverse is this, and I'm going to multiply A inverse with 1 0 to get the phi's, right? So A inverse times 1 0, what does that give me? Minus 1 into 1 and 3 into 1, right? So that means phi 1 of 1 0 is minus 1, phi 1 of 0 1 is 3. So I have, okay, is this okay? You have minus 1 and 3.
What are we treating 2, 1 and 3, 1 as our basis now? 2, 1 and 3, 1 are
3, 1, 2, 1 and 3, 1 are basis vectors over here, right?
their basis.
Yes.
But what we have got is phi 1 of 1, 0.
Yes, so what is 1, 0 exactly? 1, 0 is the x, right? And 0, 1 is y. So in fact, how will I write this phi? I will write phi 1 is equal to, let me then write, okay, let me write in 2 steps, phi 1 of 1 0, 0 1, to which I will now give the values x and y, just for simplicity, will be minus x plus 3y. Is this clear? Here. Minus 1 of 1 0 plus 3 of 0 1. So this will just give me minus x plus 3y. So you can see now it is a number, right? So if I'm given some value of x and y, then phi 1 of x and y is just a number. Let us say phi is 20, x is 22 and y is minus 35.2, then I can calculate phi 1 for that set x, y. In fact, we will also do that, okay? I will keep this last equation so that you will be able to see it, but I will remove the rest to calculate. Or will you do it in your notebooks? Can you please calculate phi 2 in your notebooks? Please calculate phi 2 in your notebooks. I is equal to 2, j is equal to 1. Phi 2 of V1 is delta 2 1, which is 0, which is in fact 2 times phi 2 of 1 0 plus 1 times phi 2 of 0 1. And please continue this. And the matrix that you have to solve invert is the same matrix, right? Except that instead of having 1 0, you will get 0 1, because you will get delta 1 2 and delta 2 2. So please just follow this and get the answer. And after some 3 minutes, I will write down the answer, okay? So you will get as the answer phi 2 of 1 0 is equal to 1, phi 2 of 0 1 is equal to minus 2. So that means phi 2, I hope you can see this part of the board, is x minus 2y. I'll write it again here. So phi 1 of x comma y is minus x plus 3y. Phi 2 of x comma y is x minus 2y, which you could have expected looking at the structure of this matrix, right? So simply by using the definition over here, which I have written over here, right? Definition of a dual basis. I have used the original basis of V to compute the elements of the phi 1 and phi 2. Now what is the statement? In this new dual vector space V star, which is spanned by phi 1 and phi 2, any arbitrary vector, this is the question that all of you had, any vector phi can be written as phi V1 of phi 1 plus phi V2 of phi 2, etc., plus phi Vn of phi n. So let us take an example. So let me take any arbitrary phi of xy, and the example given by this gentleman, I have to find his somewhere in my notes. I will give you the reference. He has taken it to be 8x minus 7y. Okay. How do I represent this in this basis? So what do I have to do? I will have to write it as phi v1, let me write the equation phi 1 plus phi v2 phi 2 plus, we have only 2, so I don't need to care about it. And what was v1? 2 comma 1. And what is v2? 3 comma 1. Right? So what will this give me? What is phi of v1? Here. V1 is 2 and 1. So 2 and 1. So phi of V1 will be 8 2s are 16 minus 7 into 1. 16 minus 7 is 9 phi 1. And what is V2? 3 comma 1. So this will be 3 comma 1. So phi V2 will be 8 3s are 24 minus 7. Oh God, which is 17. I hope that is correct. I can't do subtraction. Okay. Okay, fine. So that means I have now represented this vector 8x minus 7y in this V star basis as 9 phi 1 plus 17 phi 2. How do we know this is correct? I have just solved for you phi 1 and phi 2. So let us substitute. So this is 9 times minus x plus 3y plus 17 times x minus 2y, and you can do the higher mathematics and show if you have done your arithmetic correct, this is 8x minus 7y, as it should be. Is it clear? Okay, so this is a trivial example, but it's very instructive. So it can tell you that, I mean, you stop here 19 phi 1 plus 17 phi 2, and then you make sure that actually that makes sense, it's consistent. Okay. So what have you done now? You have started with this basis set 2 1 3 1. I have moved to this new set which is phi 1 phi 2. Of course phi 1 and phi 2 are implicitly defined in terms of the original x and y, but you still leave it as phi 1 phi 2. Then I can then define any arbitrary vector phi in this new dual vector space V star in terms of these phi 1 and phi 2, and the coefficients will be given in terms of the original basis set. So now you see that the dual space in some sense is tied to defining the dual basis, which is tied to this definition in terms of the original basis vectors. Okay, it's not independent. Okay, actually you will find that this is not true of the dual, but that is for your further reading. I am not going to go there. Okay, so
is it dual of a dual? We get back the original.
No, it is scalar.
no, it's not. No, it's a completely different space.
Madam, as a first dual we get the scalar, anything scalar. So and second dual what will you get? Scalar.
Yeah, it is simply another map. This is, you can see that the phi's are, so I could have started with the phi basis, right?
Yes.
Then I can define the dual to it.
Okay.
You can define anything. So it's a dual of a dual. Okay, you know, they have some names, tangent space, cotangent space, but if you're going to be interested in, you know, doing some more formal mathematical physics, then you will learn all this in the next semester. It will come in the differential geometry course. Okay, I don't want to go there. Also, I find, see, the reason I did this mathematical example was the examples that we see in physics, okay, are all probably things that you have not yet learnt. So that's why I decided to give you this I finally found this here. Let me write it. Can you see this part of the board?
Some things are written in dual of a dual. Vector space is the original.
One second. No, it's not.
So here Balakrishnan there.
So this is on GitHub. Okay, so this is where I took this example from. See, if you have done relativistic quantum mechanics, yeah, so then I would have given you some nice examples from there, which is very easy to understand. Or if you've done classical electrodynamics in 4-vector relativistic form, I could have given you some nice examples from there. So I'm just giving you these names now so that you can look for it when you do the quantum mechanics and when you do the classical electrodynamics. You will find dual vectors coming up all over the place, and I will simply make the statement for you, but sorry, I took the other one off. Okay, so for example, we talked about this scalar product A comma B, and we also said that it's possible that if it's a complex vector space, then this comes out to be lambda star of A comma B. And I also gave the example that when you have a wave function psi, then the norm or whatever physically that appears in your quantum mechanics is psi star psi and not psi into psi, right? Now, this thing has a notation given by Dirac. It's not only limited to relativistic physics, but you will usually come across it when you solve Dirac equation, which will come in relativistic quantum mechanics. You can write this wave function as written in this way. Okay, so this is actually psi, and you can write psi star as this. Then this object can be written as, it's a very convenient notation, that's all. Okay, it subsumes all this. Yes, it's just a notation. Okay, but you will find that what does this mean? It means that if you have this object, given psi, if you have this object, then I can make a combination. For example, I don't need to write psi psi. Suppose I define a map such that phi psi gives me some number. This is the overlap of the wave function psi and phi, right?
So ma'am, this is the basis in the dual space only, and the.
So in fact, this is a dual space to this.
Yes.
This is the dual to this.
Yes, and the
Correct.
The elements are the scalar number.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is it clear? So you will come across this again in the classical electrodynamics when you talk about vector potential. Okay, see, we talked about this hyperplane, right? So I have some. Let me take a circle. I can define the tangent at some point. Okay, I can if I have a surface, I can have many tangents, right? Because I have a surface. I can have a tangent this way, I can have a tangent this way, and in hyperdimension I can have many tangents to a point in space. Okay, so all these vectors together form a tangent space. Then I can ask how things change when I move along the tangent. Okay, so it's basically a question of differential. So how do I differentiate? Because how things change when you move across a line is actually taking the derivative of that quantity. That's how you find things are changing, right? So that will give you another space. So that will become dual to the original space. So many such examples you will come across. As I said, none of which you have learned till now. So we will leave this as an example in mathematics as a two-dimensional example. Is it okay? But you will find the importance of this coming up. And even if they don't tell you in so many words, this is actually a dual vector space. Is it okay? And the interesting thing, as I said, is that this has, you can see there were two phis which spanned the space. So it will have the same dimensional as the original space. So it is a mapping actually from the original space to this space. Okay? Fine. So that, I think, did I want to, yeah, there are some more things about this vector space. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Something about canonical transformations, I don't want to talk about it. I think we will stop at this point. Okay, fine. So now we will come back to our stuff. So where did we stop? I think we had defined this thing. Okay, but maybe we will talk about. because before I diagonalize the matrix, I want to remind you about what we had done, because I used some of those concepts and that was very long ago, okay? So I go back to my eigenvalue equation. Which anyway you know how to solve, but you remember that I had done the transformation like this. And if I want to write this as a matrix equation, then this is a matrix is a column vector. So I can write Aij xj as lambda xi, right? So maybe I should just write it. So that means this has all the xj's in it. So this is not the same xi and xj on the two sides, okay? Now I want to change the coordinate system so that I go from x to x prime. So how was that equation? You remember? X was equal to gamma x prime. So you can, again, if you want, you can write xi is sum over j gamma ij xj prime. But for me it is enough to, this is a proper matrix equation, gamma x prime, or x prime is equal to gamma inverse x. So now I can take this equation, Ax is equal to lambda x, and I can insert gamma inverse, gamma inverse, and define this to be x prime. So I have A gamma x prime is equal to lambda gamma x prime. Now I will left multiply by gamma inverse. So I will get gamma inverse A gamma, which I will call A x prime, and it's the same lambda, by the way. The eigenvalues have not changed due to this transformation. Okay, this is very important.
Should we call this A prime now?
Sorry?
Gamma inverse A gamma.
Yeah, okay, I just called it script A, but you can call it A prime, something else. It's a similarity transformation. You would have seen it earlier, right? You know it's a similarity transformation. Now we take the specific example. You take the case
And here x is a coordinate.
A.
X.
Yes, x is the coordinate. X is the coordinate. So x is equal to, for example, in this basis, and x prime is equal to in the new basis, and the basis transforms according to Ei prime is equal to sum over j gamma j I E j, right? You remember that this is, they have names, they are called contragradient and cogradient, but it doesn't matter what it is. That this would have transformed as Ij over here, and this transforms as Ji over here. Okay, so just something to be careful about, that's all. I mean, we have now said it some 100 times, right?
Then coordinate and basis is
No, they are coefficients. I think x has a coefficients and the matrix.
Xi are the coefficients which describe x in terms of the Ei basis. Let us say that I have a basis. Let us take this vector x. Okay, I can express it in terms of x, y, z. So that will be some whatever, some x times x plus y times y plus z times z, right? Or I can express it in r theta phi. So that is E prime basis, right? So the values of this coefficients which are this is called the xi's. So these are the xi's. All these are the xi's. And in r theta phi they will be called the xi prime. Right? So I am doing a coordinate transformation. This is the basis vector, which you can notice has come from V back to E. What is the difficulty here?
And I think if the basis vector transform like this, then
Let us take an example in one dimension. Let us say that x is equal to some 12 times 12.
rotation. Suppose I have an xy plane, then I rotate the coordinate system at an
Yes.
angle theta.
Yes.
Then
Yeah, then what you have, then you know that x is equal to rho cos theta, y is equal to rho sin theta, and you can convert into the new basis, no? You can find the transformation between them. There's a matrix of transformation between them, right? You can transform it. All I'm saying is that let us say, okay, let us just take a one-dimensional example. This is x, right? This is y. Let us take a one-dimensional example. Everything is along x. So suppose I have 12 units along the x direction. That is my vector. That is 12 times the unit vector ei, which is the unit vector x. So the unit vector along the x direction is called ex or e1. The unit vector along the y direction is called e2. The unit vector along the z direction is called e3. That's all. So the relationship, so what is this xi ei? Suppose this vector is some 12 comma 3 comma minus 18 or something like that, right? So it says that the components is 12 in the x direction, 12 times in the unit e1 direction, 3 units in the y direction, and minus 18 units in the z direction. But the basis set are the unit vectors, right? See, we always think of orthonormal set, right? Your basis is orthonormal with some unit vector, that's all. So the e's, so see, okay, so this vector x, let us not do a coordinate transformation. Let us just say that I have some vector x. Now I can write the vector x in, let us say, 25 different bases. We can write, I mean, 3 dimensions. I can easily think of 25 different sets which are proper spanning the space, right? Now in each space the quantities x1, x2, x3 will be different, but the vector itself is the same vector, right? That's all. So this x, when I talk about this x, this is actually a basis independent, you don't normally talk about it, but this is a basis independent representation.
Because it represents a physical quantity.
It represents a physical quantity. I could have written it in terms of the e's or the e primes or the e double primes, then that will become a basis dependent quantity. But this eigenvalue equation actually doesn't depend on the representation that I use or the choice of basis. Okay, so this is the difference between the two.
And those x and x prime which you have written as summations,
Yeah.
those x and x primes are exactly equal, right?
Yes, they are identical. They are identical. This just gives you the same vector in the e basis. This gives you the same vector in the e prime basis.
Vector cannot be different. As it is physical quantity, it cannot be different.
Cannot be different. Exactly. That is the statement. That is the statement. Yeah.
Now, one thing. So we have know that the determinant tells us about the interpretation of the volume of some hyper.
Correct.
And what is the physical significance of trace? What is it tells us about trace? Is it tells us about something, or it can help in something in quantum mechanics or something, because other
No.
terms helps us in.
I mean, trace is a very powerful concept because it actually, you know, I think, did I give you that as homework? Determinant of e power a is e power trace a.
No. We had done it in BSc, but okay.
Okay, so that becomes a very important thing. So when you diagonalize something, you know, so there are certain invariants.
Yes.
You know, like trace is actually the sum of the eigenvalues.
Yes.
So determinant is the product of the eigenvalues. So these are invariants because whatever similarity transformation, okay, let me complete this, then you'll understand why the similarity transformation is there. Whatever similarity transformation you apply, those quantities are invariant actually, okay?
Yes.
So that is the whole point. This is the whole, so what I was coming to is that I want to take the case, I stopped there, okay, where I transform to a set, so I don't want all this. I transform to a basis in which these x prime are actually the e's. Okay, that means I have an equation, this a or a prime or whatever I called it, e I prime is equal to lambda e I prime, or a, I haven't said what is aij ej is lambda e I prime. Okay, so I keep transforming until, because I mean just as the set x1 x2 spans the space, even e1 e2 spans the space, e prime 1 e prime 2 spans the space. So I transform to the space from x to the e prime basis, which is a set of orthonormal basis vectors. Then you can see what is happening. What is the meaning of being orthonormal? That means any combination, because this is actually the sum, right? What is this? This is a11 x1 plus a12 x2, so this contains x1 x2 xn. But because e's are orthonormal, then the left hand side, if the right hand side is ei, the right hand side can only be ei. All the other combinations are 0, which means that your a prime is just the diagonal object. That's the only way you can get it, aii. That's the only combination that survives. Is it clear? Here, I apply such a similarity transformation such that a prime is diagonal. You can look at it the other way around. If a prime is diagonal, then I have only these elements, right? So what will that give me?
Yeah, then it's fine. If a prime is given to be diagonal, then
Yeah, but it's actually the argument is the other way around.
yes,
Because you're transforming it into this basis, a prime becomes diagonal, which means that I have found a way of diagonalizing this matrix. And what are the diagonal elements?
okay.
That's the
The eigen
They are the eigenvalues, the lambdas. And that is, you can see, very important that the lambdas don't get transformed.
the physical thing.
The lambdas didn't get transformed, so they are the invariants, right? So by this procedure, I can take any arbitrary matrix A, I can take the eigenvalue equation, I can transform the x in such a way that I diagonalize my matrix and the diagonal elements are the eigenvalues. Apart from that, what is this particular gamma? This gamma, which I have written here, is written in terms of, let me write that equation, E prime equation, Ei prime or Ej prime is equal to gamma ij Ei, right? So what is the column, the jth column of gamma ij or the ith column of gamma ij? It is the coefficient of the, or the component of Ej prime in the set, in terms of the set Ei, which means that if you just think about it for a moment, your gamma is simply this. The columns of gamma are just this. Is it clear? Because that is just exactly the columns of, it's the component of E prime in the basis E. So the first component will be the vector E prime 1, second one will be E prime 2. And what are these vectors? What will be these vectors? Very nice. These are the eigenvectors of the matrix A. So this process of transformation gives you the A prime matrix, which is diagonal with elements across the diagonal as its eigenvalues, and the matrix of the transformation will give you the set of eigenvectors of the matrix.
If the element in the diagonal as an eigenvalue, then we have to normalize this eigenvector to the
Yes, they are all orthonormal. That is the definition of the basis. You have to have them.
And
Okay.
one more thing, all this is valid when E prime basis is orthogonal.
Yes, 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 yes. That we have even shown. In fact, maybe I will just actually write that down somewhere. I have to. Okay, I'll rub out this because I need some space. Ask the question. Huh. here. So we started out with the basis set. So here this is EI, EJ is delta AJ. EI into EJ is delta AJ. That is the orthonormal basis that we have started out with. So what about the EJ prime? So let us write EJ prime. So here EI prime into EJ prime. So let me, because I'm going to copy it so that I get my indices right. Gamma Ki Ek sum over L gamma Lj into El. And what is Ek into El? Delta KL, right? So any one summation goes away. Let me say that the L summation goes away. So gamma Ki gamma Lk. Okay, that is what I have.
You can write L as K.
Sorry, sorry, L is K, J. Okay. That I can write as, I can write gamma Ki as gamma Ik transpose, and if it is a complex vector space, then this would have actually been a star, right? So I have a conjugate transpose which is actually the dagger gamma Kj, that is gamma dagger gamma. Ijth element, that is equal. Because in the first class I showed you that gamma was Hermitian, orthogonal. Okay? So if Ei dot Ej was delta Aj, then Ei prime dot Ej prime is also delta Aj. Okay?
So suppose we make another kind of a transformation, coordinate transformation, where gamma is not orthogonal.
Then you have difficulty.
Then we won't have all these things.
Yeah, but you will prove that actually gamma is orthogonal. In fact, gamma is not orthogonal because it's gamma dagger. It depends on the, if it's not a real vector space, if it's a complex vector space, you have a star. In fact, gamma is unitary, and that you can prove. You can prove that gamma is unitary.
Then the inverse will not be possible.
Huh?
Then the
Otherwise, you don't have an inverse. See, you have to have a gamma. You introduce a gamma inverse, right? And in fact, the gamma inverse is gamma dagger because it's unitary. But if you don't have, see, okay, it depends on which way you look at it. I think the correct way, I'm a little confused myself. I think the correct way to look at it is, I can always transform from one set of orthonormal basis to another set of orthonormal basis. Now the normalization is guaranteed because the norm is greater than 0, so I can always normalize it. Let's look at finite dimensional vector spaces, okay? Let's not look at infinite dimensional ones. And I can always, by Gram-Schmidt procedure, I can always make a set of orthogonal bases. So actually, in fact, I think the argument should be the other way around. Since I can construct E primes as an orthonormal basis, then gamma is, I think I would like to put it this way. So if I assume that this is true, if I say that Ei dot Ej prime is delta Ij, then immediately it gives me that gamma is unitary. So I would actually like to think of it like this, because we have already shown that the norm can always be made unit, and I can always make the basis set spanning the space as orthogonal to each other. Therefore, every set Ei prime can be made an orthonormal basis, and because of which Ei dot Ej in the prime basis is still delta Aj, which means that gamma is unitary. So that means if I have a transformation like this, due to a transformation of the x's through gamma, then gamma is unitary. In fact, the inverse exists, gamma is unitary in addition to the inverse x, because so gamma inverse is equal to gamma dagger, right? That is the meaning of unitary. Is it okay? Fine. So what was I doing this all for? So I didn't give you this, is it? I think you should have determinant of e to the power of a is e to the trace a. Anyway, you can worry about it. Maybe some other time you can do it. Okay. So anyway, so now I have this thing. So I have now given you a procedure for diagonalizing a matrix, right? Through certain sets of transformations, and this is something that has probably was done in school, but it's instructive to look at it again. And I think the example is also from Matthews and Walker. So I'm trying to, as I said, because you are PhD students, I'm trying to take it from fixed textbooks so that you don't have to. So let us see how to diagonalize a matrix. We have given the procedure. Let's see. So we just saw that if Ax is equal to lambda x, then A prime or A or whatever is gamma inverse A gamma, where gamma is unitary, is diagonal. Finish that statement. And this unitary matrix has its column vectors. Yeah.
Only then would A prime be diagonal.
Yes. Yes.
There,
Yes.
There are other gammas where A prime won't be diagonal.
Yes. Yes. So how do we construct such a thing?
We find the eigenvalues and eigenvectors, then
No, what you do is the other way around. While solving it, you find the eigenvalues and eigenvectors. Okay, that is the way you normally do it. Okay, so you apply the procedure and then that gives you the answer. So let us say that there is at least one eigenvector or eigenvalue. So I want to diagonalize this matrix A. So I say A, let me call this eigenvalue as U1. So A U1 is equal to lambda 1 U1. That we know because we know how to solve this using determinant of A minus lambda equal to 0, and the secular equation has at least one solution. So I can always write this. Okay. So let me choose. So I have to find the EI primes, right? Let me choose E1 prime is equal to U1. So it's a very simple transformation. I find one eigenvalue equation, one eigenvector, and I pick that E1 prime to be U1. So now I transform. A goes to A prime such that A prime I1 is given by this procedure. So I have a full matrix. So let's write the matrix. This is my matrix of A prime. So what is A prime? When I is equal to 1, I have lambda 1. Otherwise, I have 0. So this is the I1 elements. And this is some other matrix, let's call it G. So this I can do. Now you see I have G and I can just repeat the whole thing again. I can think of G as my A. I can transform so that I get my next eigenvalue here with a bunch of zeros, and then I get a one-dimensional smaller matrix. Let's call it H. Then I can multiply that, and then I can multiply that, and so. Okay? Is it okay?
How have we found lambda 1?
I know that, no, I start out with saying that I know the eigenvalues. I have a secular equation. I have solved lambda 1 to lambda n. That is not a difficulty.
Okay.
But I don't know my eigenvectors. So I say that for one eigenvalue equation, I can find one eigenvector. I have to find that first eigenvector. Once I find the first eigenvector, then the way to diagonalize A, see, the thing is there are two things required here. If I find the eigenvalues and the eigenvectors, then the columns of eigenvectors will form the gamma matrix, which will then be used to make A diagonal. So I want to make A diagonal. So I am doing the procedure step by step. I don't need to solve all the eigenvectors. I find one eigenvector. Then the eigenvector, I can choose the row or column of this new matrix to be that E prime dot U1. So I know that I know that E1 prime. I don't know what is E2 prime. I don't know what is E3 prime, etc. But I know that it has to satisfy this, because this is an orthonormal set. I've taken E1 prime to be U1. So E1 into E2 prime should be 0, E1 into E3 prime should be 0. That's why I get the whole row. And by symmetry, you can do this whole column also will be 0.
This is A prime.
This is A prime. Sorry, A prime is equal to, yeah. Now I will have this sub n minus 1 dimensional submatrix. I can do the same thing all over again. I can start with G. I can find the eigenvalue equation of G. I can find one eigenvalue of G. It's one eigenvector I call E2 prime. And then I can find G of I comma 2 will be E2 prime into G of U2.
Okay.
And then I can keep on doing this, and then I get all the things
I have
diagonalized.
to do it for n minus 1 square matrix.
Yes, yes. And then the next will be n minus 2 square matrix, then a n minus 3 square matrix. So each time you will get one value along the diagonal, and the rest will be 0.
Yeah, so basically this is the diagonal matrix, so it will be only the eigenvalue.
Yes, but there is a little bit of a technicality. If some of the eigenvalues are repeated, then you may not be able to get it completely into diagonal form. It may be block diagonal form. So I will simply make a few remarks about it. Then we will do the actual one example. One three-dimensional stupid example is there, and we will actually work it through. Okay, before the class ends.
Now eigenvalue is 0, so what will be the whole column will be 0.
Yes, 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 yes,
Then
yes.
the determinant will be 0.
Yes, 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 yes. Yes. Yes, yes. Okay. So, yeah. So, okay, there is a remark, some remarks to be made here. Remarks. Before I actually do the example, there are some remarks. Suppose I have, okay, now that we have decided that gamma is unitary, you will find that all your matrices A actually are preferably Hermitian. You can always put them into such a form. I will show you. So the A matrix sometimes is called H because it's a Hermitian matrix. Okay. Suppose I have two Hermitian matrices, H1 and H2. The question, can they be simultaneously diagonalized by some of course it has to be a unitary transformation.
You have called A to be Hermitian. How is that?
Yeah?
A is Hermitian.
Hermitian, yes. I will just give you, let's start with, let me just say that I am starting with two Hermitian matrices. Anyway, in physics you will always have Hermitian matrices, but yes. Okay, so that means the question is this, can I write U inverse H1U to be diagonal. This is the similarity transformation on H1, and the same matrix, and by the way, because it's unitary now I've called it U instead of gamma. The notation should not bother you, should also be diagonal. That means simultaneously the same U matrix is able to diagonalize both H1 and H2. Okay. Now suppose I do D1 D2 minus D2 D1. What is this? Have you come across such a thing before?
Commutator.
The commutator D1 D2. What do you know about the commutator of diagonal matrices?
H is 0.
Very nice. So this is very nice, right? Now that's the meaning of diagonal matrices, right? So D1 D2 minus D2 D1 is 0, and what is that? D1 D2 is U inverse H1 U inverse H2 U minus U inverse H2 U inverse H1 U, and what do you know about U inverse? So this is U inverse H1 H2. Is this clear?
But we know that they are diagonal.
Is there a question?
He's saying what if D1 and D2 do not commute, but I'm saying they are diagonal, so they should commute.
Diagonal matrices commute. You just write that, no? What is Dij is equal to some Dii delta Ij. Then you can immediately show that the D1 D2 commute if they are diagonal, right? Just do it and show that they commute. Okay, so that means this is 0, which means that H1 and H2 must commute, right? Because U is unitary, so U inverse and U cannot be 0, and therefore H1 and H2 must commute. So if you have to be able to simultaneously diagonalize two Hermitian matrices H1 and H2, then they have to first commute with each other. This is the condition for simultaneously diagonalizing Hermitian matrices. Okay. Now this is a necessary condition. So necessary condition is H1 and H2 commute. What about a sufficient condition? It turns out that this is both necessary and sufficient. Okay, and to prove that, look at the converse. Suppose U diagonalizes H1. But it is not able to diagonalize H2. So let's call it some matrix M which is not diagonal. So now I have only one D, I don't need D1 and D2. So again I construct D1 D2 minus D2 D1. So what is that? Dm minus Md. Nothing has changed on the left hand side. So this is equal to U inverse H1 H2 U, that is equal to 0, because we already showed the necessary condition is that they commute. We are only talking about sufficient condition. So it tells you that Dm and Md are 0, which means that D and M commute. Okay, so we have, let's write it down in equation form. Dm minus Md is equal to 0. So D has only elements, so let's write the ijth element of this, right? No, let me write it as Md so that you know we can see it easier. Md, it's the same equation. So I want to write the ijth element. So m ij d j k. So this will be the ikth element, but d is diagonal, so this is only djj, right? Minus, so this is the ijth element, right? So this has to be d I m I j is equal to 0, or these two are equal. Is it clear? I have just written the ijth element of each of them. You want to have written this. And you can see there's Mij on both sides. So what it says is that Mij equal to 0 if dii not equal to djj, if I, that is I not equal to j. These are diagonal. So if the ith element of d and the jth element of d are different, then the only way you can make these two equal, because this is different from this, right? But there is an equality and both of them are Mij on both sides. This is an element, I mean this is an element, therefore I can write this as djj into Mij, because when you have it as components then I can interchange them. There's nothing about commuting, non-commuting, anything. So that means the only way you can have it is Mij equal to 0, I not equal to j 0, or m is diagonal, because all the non-zero elements are, non-diagonal elements are 0. So if all the eigenvalues, what is dii? dii, so dii equal to the lambda I of h1, lambda 1 I, maybe I can call it, of h1. So if all the eigenvalues are distinct, then dii is not equal to djj, then definitely m is diagonal and you have your sufficient condition. That means m is also diagonal. You don't have to worry about further conditions required to diagonalize h1 and h2 simultaneously. The problem occurs if dii equal to djj. That means if, so this are, let me call it as unique, if the eigenvalues are unique, so if repeated lambda, then what will happen? Let us say there are 3 lambdas which repeat, then there will be I, j, k, 3 values, let us say 1, 2 and 3, for which dii and djj are the same. In that case, for consistency Mij need not be 0, need not be diagonal, but then what you will get is, oh, I cannot write over there, sorry. So let us say that I will get a, let us say the first 3 eigenvalues are repeating. Then in my matrix M is what I want to show is as diagonal as possible. Let us say the 3 eigenvalues are repeating. Then for those 3 eigenvalues, the Mij's are not necessarily 0. So I will get a block like this. I will get a 3 by 3 block. Then let us say that all the other eigenvalues are different. Then I will get only the, sorry, so let me write the matrix properly. Then I will only get the, so what will happen is that at worst M is block diagonal.
This is called block.
Right? This is block diagonal. So block diagonal means that you have blocks along the diagonal which may be greater than, this is a 1 by 1 block. This is a 1 by 1 block, this is a 1 by 1 block, this is a 1 by 1 block, and this is a 3 by 3 block. So if 3 eigenvalues are repeating and the others are unique, you will get it like this. I mean, you don't have to put it first, you can put it anywhere, it is block diagonal. Can you diagonalize this matrix? Very often you can actually diagonalize it. Okay, look at this matrix. Okay. You can actually take this block diagonal matrix, and this submatrix is also Hermitian, and then you can take this little Hermitian matrix and diagonalize it. Always, any Hermitian matrix I can diagonalize, because a single Hermitian matrix I can diagonalize through a unitary transformation. The main point is that when I diagonalize this through a unitary transformation, it will not affect the D. because the D was already diagonal. The D over here was 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 1. So whatever transformation I put over there is not going to affect the D matrix. So I will be able to actually bring it back into fully diagonal form, which you will only see through an explicit example, so I won't go further in this. So the answer is that if the eigenvalues are repeated, you will start out with the block diagonal form, but that corner of matrix you can then again rotate through a unitary transformation without affecting the D and then make it into a fully diagonal matrix. So then it is possible to get both D and M as diagonal matrices. So if H1 and H2 commute, this is the necessary and sufficient condition for them to be simultaneously diagonalized by a single unitary matrix U. Is it okay? Okay. Now, the general statement then we have let me take an arbitrary matrix. May not be Hermitian, so let's call it M. I can always write M as A plus IB, where A and B are Hermitian. It's always possible, right? How do we know this is possible? What are A and B? Very nice. M dagger is A minus IB. So A is M plus M dagger by 2. B is M minus M dagger by 2. Right? What is A dagger?
Symmetry matrix.
No, A dagger. What is A dagger?
So maybe
A dagger is A, so it's a Hermitian matrix.
that's why
And what is B dagger?
it's and
B. So both A and B are Hermitian matrices. That means I can write any arbitrary matrix in terms of two Hermitian matrices, right? Now, because they are Hermitian, I know that. Huh?
shouldn't D dagger be M dagger minus M, so
Yeah, but I will become minus I. That is why that I is important. Okay? Yeah, correct. Okay? Fine?
yes, ma'am.
So I know that I have now two Hermitian matrices. I have just shown you that a Hermitian matrix can be diagonalized by unitary transformation. So I can diagonalize A and B through two different Hermitian matrices. But can you diagonalize them with the same Hermitian same unitary matrix? Why is it required? Because only if A and B are simultaneously diagonal will M be diagonal. Say I want to diagonalize some arbitrary matrix M, right? So there is no point in making A diagonal with one matrix, because then the other matrix will not be diagonal. So the question is, will A and B be simultaneously diagonalized by a single unitary matrix? We just saw the answer to that. What is the condition for two Hermitian matrices to be simultaneously diagonalizable? A and B must commute. So that means A and B must commute means what is the condition on M? A and B are just M's and M daggers. M and M will commute, M dagger will commute. So this means that M and M dagger must commute. Right? Obviously. So if M and M dagger commute, then the matrix can be diagonalized, and these are called, it's just the name, nomenclature, these are called normal matrices. So if N and M dagger commute, then I can always diagonalize M through a unitary transformation, and such matrices are called normal matrices.
Madam, though A and B are commuting, so they have the same eigenvectors. So M and M dagger, the unitary, the diagonalization will the eigenvectors of M and M dagger
will become the, so the common eigenvectors of A and B will become the eigenvectors of M.
same eigenvector.
Yes, yes, that is the solution. And what will happen is that M will become that script M or whatever, which will be diagonal, and those diagonal elements will be the eigenvalues of M.
Because it is constructed
Absolutely,
A and B.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and in fact, now that we know this fact, you can actually show that determinant of any matrix is e to the power of trace A. Maybe you can try this. Okay, so I think I should stop here.